The UK Commercial Vehicle Operator Report, now in its third year, is an in-depth analysis around the habits of the UK commercial vehicle park. It's produced by Texaco Lubricants in association with Motor Transport and Commercial Motor and carried out on our behalf by Fusion Research. Their Managing Director is Phil Redwood, and Phil's here with me today to analyse the results of this year's survey. Phil, if you were to choose 5 key elements of the research this year, how would you sum it up?
Well, first of all, operators went into this year feeling fairly optimistic, but what we've seen is the market's been slightly more challenging than they thought and confidence is quite shaky. So we've got some interesting results about how they're feeling about what's going on in the market. Secondly, brands. DAF remains the leading brand in terms of market share, but some really interesting movements in some of the other brands, some winners, some losers. Thirdly, what's important to them? Fuel economy, again, researching very highly in terms of what's important. Fourthly, Euro 6. We're starting to see at last some shifts in attitudes in terms of Euro 6 and also awareness. Again, some interesting stuff. And as this is in our third year, we're starting to see some real trends in the market. Fifth, for the first time, we've looked at breakdowns, common causes of breakdowns.
Now, tell me a little bit about the sample, 500 UK truck operators.
Firstly, 500, very robust. And within that, we've sampled a range of operators, 5 vehicles in their fleet or more from around the country. Very similar methodology this year as we have in the last 2 years. So results, very meaningful.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Phil. Right, come on, let's get stuck in. So what have we got here?
Well, a very good indicator of how confident the market is, in this case, is how many vehicles they're buying. So what we have here is an analysis of how many vehicles they bought in the last 12 months and how many vehicles they're going to be looking to buy in the next 12 months. So looking down the data, we understand that in the last 12 months, operators in our research bought on average 11.4 new vehicles. Let's compare that to the same period last time in terms of what they were planning to do, and we know that it's 13.3. In other words, 13.3 they're expecting to buy, they bought 11.4.
Which marries with the market, really, doesn't it? That 2012, or certainly the first 6 months of 2012, has been pretty difficult. Double dip recession, difficulties in Europe. That's against that background, isn't it?
Yeah, and we see that through the research and see it across all categories of purchase, if you like, second-hand, rented, or contract hire, etc. Mm-hmm. Looking forward into the future, what we see is, compared to the last 12 months, the purchase of new vehicles is likely to go up slightly, but again, a lot of caution in the market. So what the research is telling us that on average, they're going to be buying 12.8 vehicles on average in the next 12 months. So that compares to 11.4 in the last 12 months, slightly up.
Right, and the 17.1 here in brackets, that's telling us what they purchased in the previous 12 months. Is it back in, when are we now talking, 2011?
Absolutely, a lot more confidence back then.
And the extended rental or contract hire, it looks like that as an area of the market, certainly in what people are expecting to do in the next 12 months, is something that's contracting.
Relatively small as a proportion of purchases generally, and yes, it's predicted to decline slightly.
So that's looked at the number of vehicles that people are seeking to acquire. Is there any sentiment around the company confidence?
Absolutely. Taking exactly the same data, but analysing it in a slightly different way. What we can do is understand whether operators individually are planning to buy more vehicles or less. And what we see is a very balanced picture. For example, new vehicles. What they tell us that is 29% tell us that actually they're going to buy less vehicles in the coming 12 months than they did in the last 12 months.
Right, okay, so we're getting on for a third of operators are saying they're going to be buying less vehicles next year than they are this.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we see a not dissimilar amount, so a fairly similar, 26%, who think they're going to increase the number of vehicles.
Okay, so there's a balance.
Absolutely.
But around second-hand rental or contract hire, and this extended rental or contract hire, effectively what we're saying, there's virtually nobody expecting to extend their rental or contract hire. And I guess that marries with a market attitude where rental and leasing companies just don't want to be extending rental or contracts anymore.
Absolutely, and it's consistent with all the data that we're seeing.
Right, a fascinating picture. Okay, so presumably you've got me a slide that looks at that issue around which makes the consideration set of vehicles. Shall
Absolutely. What we see is there's some variation between vehicle size. So at the top end of the market, those with 50 or 51 vehicles or more, what we see is consideration, which brands are they looking to buy in the next 12 months. DAF is the largest brand in terms of consideration, 39%. Mercedes, close behind, 36% consideration, and Volvo, 29%. In the research, we see Volvo researching better this year than we did last year. So one of the winners.
That is consistent, is it?
Yes, it's consistent with last year. Slightly different story in the mid-market. 59% of operators in that mid-sized fleet are considering DAF. Mercedes, again, close behind. And interestingly, MAN last year, as this year, has researched well in that mid-market, 36% considering.
There seems to be a trend emerging here where the differentiation between DAF and Mercedes, that gap, feels like it's getting a bit closer.
Absolutely. We saw that last year, we're seeing it again this year. That gap is closing.
Right. And in the smaller operators, although certainly not less significant, 5 to 25 vehicle set, what have we got saying here?
Well, interestingly, we don't see DAF for a start. So the single largest brand consideration-wise is Mercedes, 35%. Scania, a brand we've not seen so far, 19%. And interestingly, Renault and Volvo, 15% are considering in that smaller fleet size.
Right. This is an interesting picture now emerging. So one of the big issues, of course, that everybody keeps talking about is about Euro 6 and the impact that this is going to have on buying trends going forward. None of this is presumably looking at Euro 6. I think that's still a very small consideration of the market. What have we got on Euro 6?
Well, one of the first questions we ask about Euro 6 is, are people actually aware when Euro 6 comes in? So it's a spontaneous question we ask. And when we actually work through the numbers, what we find is actually 20% of operators are correctly aware of when Euro 6 is coming in. 28%, they say they're aware, but actually they're not. And 50% quite openly say that they're not aware.
But they do at least know that Euro 6 is on the way, because there's only 2% of those that are...
Absolutely. 98% of the people, or the operators we speak to, are aware of not Euro 6.
Now, this is interesting, seeing the way that trend is emerging, the aware and gives correct answer moving from 8% to 20%. It shows that the market is aware of what's going on around Euro 6.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we would hope for, given that Euro 6 is coming in next year. So, absolutely. It's a trend over the last 2 years into our third year.
So this is telling us about Euro 6 by fleet size. I think this smart middle piece is coming out here again.
The smart middle, absolutely. 32% of that smart middle, 26 to 50 vehicle fleets, 32% are aware of and correctly identified when Euro 6 was coming in. In the largest fleet, 23% aware, and perhaps unsurprisingly, the smallest fleets, 12% are correctly aware of when Euro 6 is coming in.
This is the big one, Euro 6, trying to understand, is the big pull forward ever going to happen? Does this shed any light on this, Phil?
Well, what this is telling us is there is a shift in attitudes. For example, 20% tell us they're pulling forward the buying cycle to avoid Euro 6 vehicles, for example.
And of course, Euro 6 vehicles are expected to be 10, 12% more expensive than the outgoing Euro 5. So you would expect this to be emerging.
What else we see is that the significant proportion of people who actually don't think that it will have affect their purchasing strategy. For example, 39% say the introduction of Euro 6 will have no effect on that. So it's interesting how some are behaving differently, shifting their purchasing strategy, but others aren't.
Right. Of course, we've got this legislation, but at the end of the day, fuel prices are arguably the big issue that impacts on our operators. And fuel efficiency is still a key consideration.
Absolutely. It has been for the last couple of years. It remains so.
So this year we've added a new set of questions around breakdowns and the causes of breakdowns. I'm quite excited about the analysis here. Give me some more info.
Quite a lot of information, but if I may highlight a couple of things. Firstly, the number of breakdowns in the last 12 months. What we found is, on average, 24% of vehicles had a breakdown in the last 12 months.
Right, okay.
Secondly, looking at causes, common causes of breakdown. 3 key causes. Firstly, tyre failures, electrical faults, and also engine failures. 3 most common causes of breakdown in the last 12 months.
That's really valuable stuff, Phil. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
As you know, the UK Commercial Vehicle Operator Report is commissioned by Texaco Lubricants. I've got their Commercial Marketing Manager here with me, Dave Spence. Dave, there's a wealth of information in this year's analysis. Phil's taken us through the key points of it. What are the key drivers that are coming out for you?
Well, I think the first thing to say, Andy, is that this is the third year of the research. So we're now able to do some trending to really pick up the messages that the market is telling us. And the ability to look back and see what the changes are in behaviours is a fairly crucial element that makes this research now even more valuable. A second area that I think is something new for us this year is the investigation of what's happening in terms of breakdowns in the market. Certainly that's an area that we think that our products can have an impact on, and very interested to see what those findings were and to delve more deeply into that information to see if we can pick up some important messages that the market's telling us. Another area, of course, is specific interest to us in terms of oil drains. A lot of the work that we've done has seemed to indicate that operators are following OEM guidance in terms of drain periods, but maybe there's an indication there that there's some flexibility and operators are looking to do what they can to try and save money. And then, of course, in terms of fuel economy, that's coming out loud and clear that that's still the key issue for the industry, and we've got to make sure that we've got products that actually complement that requirement in the market. And of course, the final thing is Euro 6, just round the corner now. Interesting to see that more people are aware, you'd expect that, but still not everybody aware, so there's still some education that's needed in the market to make sure that people understand the challenges that they're going to face through Euro 6.
Thanks, Dave. The depth of information that's available here in this research has to be of interest to anybody involved in the commercial vehicle sector. If you want more information on the UK Commercial Vehicle Operator Survey, then get in touch with Texaco Lubricants today. The email address is going to come up on the closing sequence. Thanks for watching.